Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Again, thanks for tuning us in and joining us on Facebook or YouTube. We appreciate you tuning us in. B&B Hockey Talk, Aaron Bloxel here with my co-host, Mr. Matthew Bolzer. Today, we got a jam-packed show for you as we continue our 31 teams in 31 days with the St. Louis Blues. But first, we're going to do a little bit of a recap of the Hlinka Gretzky Under-18 tournament. A little bit of Canucks news and a couple of signings to go over before we get into the St. Louis Blues. Mr. Balzer, how are you today?
I'm doing good.
Excellent. Well, let's talk about the Hlinka tournament. What a crazy weekend that was. Canada, U.S. semifinal before Canada beat Sweden. Why don't you take us through the semifinal game and your notes on it?
All right, yeah. So the semifinal game, this one of the craziest finishes and controversial endings that I've seen in a while. Yeah, so Canada beat the U.S. 6-5 in overtime. Great back and forth game. I think it was 3-2 after the first period, and some crazy good goals. Like Americans scored a lacrosse goal from behind the net, which
Unbelievable goal.
Yeah. Yeah, which you don't see that often, but when guys can pull that off, it's just absolutely nuts. And then, so in the third period, the Americans were up 5-4. And in the dying seconds, Canada appeared to tie it. The big thing here is that there was no video review in this tournament. Out of the three arenas that were used in this tournament, only one had video review, so they decided not to use video review. So Canada scored, and it was watching the live version, like you could not tell if the puck went in before or after the buzzer went. And then the replays showed that the puck went in just like a couple like milliseconds after the buzzer. But the refs couldn't tell, so they huddled together and they called it a good goal, and the rest is history. Canada scored in overtime. And then they took it to the Swedes in the gold medal game as they beat them 6-2. But even that had a bit of controversy to start. Canada went down 2-0. They switched goalies, and then Canada just took off from there. They scored 3 straight goals in the first period and never looked back.
Yeah, it was a crazy finish, the Canada-U.S. game. I've never seen anything like that, but we see it a lot at the rink, whether it's in men's league or minor hockey, where the refs have to make a decision. And I really feel for the refs because, like you said, during regular time, I would have called it a good goal. Most people would have called it a good goal. Those refs called it a good goal. And, because that rink had video review, it showed it was in 2/100ths of a second after the buzzer went. The human eye can't pick that up. That was crazy finish. Canada gets a break, ends up winning it in overtime, and then disposes of Sweden in the finals. Lucky break for Canada, unlucky for U.S. I really feel bad for those kids because it is, remember, they are kids. It's 18 and under. But who did you like on Canada? Who was it? Lafreniere.
Yeah, Alexis Lafreniere. This guy is going to be the first overall pick in 2020. So Canuck fans, if we still suck, that's the guy that we'll be going for. But yeah, this guy in the Q last year as a 16-year-old put up 42 goals as a 16-year-old in the Quebec Major Junior League. That's like, and I forget, and I believe he had 80-plus points somewhere around there. But that is the best season as a 16-year-old in the Q since Sidney Crosby, which I think he's been having a pretty good NHL career. But yeah, this guy dazzled for Canada at the Hlinka Gretzky tournament. He scored the game-winning goal for Canada in the gold medal game, going coast to coast, deking through the team, and just scoring an absolutely beautiful goal. This guy, I could see making Canada's World Junior team as a 17-year-old, which you don't see as often. Usually it's the 18, 19-year-olds. But I think this guy is just that good that you can't hold him off.
Yeah, he's definitely somebody to watch for. So was it Alexis Lafreniere?
I think it's just it's spelled Alexis, but I don't know if there's like a French pronunciation.
All right. Well, a bit of Canucks news today. The Canucks had a fan contest for their third jersey. They showed the old Flying V. They showed the skate, and they showed the old Orca colors as their third jerseys. The fans voted, and they are going with the old Vancouver Canucks skate. What are your thoughts on that? Nice hat, by the way.
Oh yeah, by far. With them not having the stick and puck option, this would have been my choice by far. The jerseys that they wore a couple of years ago to honor Pat Quinn on his night, they looked sick. Like they really popped on the television, and I was pretty upset that they actually didn't use it more after that game. So I'm happy that they're bringing them back. I sure hope that they wear them multiple times this year. But if they go by the 40th anniversary where they use the stick and puck logo, I would think that we'll see this symbol or jerseys multiple times.
Well, the skate jersey, they showed a picture of Bo Horvat wearing it. Just looks absolutely amazing. It reminds me of my childhood, seeing Trevor Linden as a rookie in that jersey, Pavel Bure as a rookie in that jersey, and all my favorite Canucks like Kirk McLean and Mapan Jelena. Great to see. Can't wait. It's going to be awesome. So why don't you take us through a couple of signings that have happened over the last few days, and then we'll get into our team review of the St. Louis Blues.
All right. So the big signing was Detroit locking up Dylan Larkin to a 5-year extension worth $30.5 million. It's a $6.1 million cap hit. He led the team in points, 63 points in 82 games. This is a contract that I think the Canucks might look for when they extend Brock Besser money-wise. I would think they're around the same age. Only difference is that Larkin plays center and Besser is of course, a winger. But with this, Detroit's over $3 million over the cap now. But with Johan Franzen going on long-term IR, that will free up just a little under $4 million. So I forget if they have to get under the cap before the season starts, because Franzen won't be allowed to go on long-term IR until the season actually begins. So I'm not sure if there'll be a penalty or something of that, because last year Detroit was trying to get re-sign Anthony Siu, but they couldn't until the season actually started.
That'll be interesting to see. What other signing as well?
Yeah, and then a couple entry-level deals. We brought up in the Ottawa review. We were wondering if Brady Tkachuk would turn pro, and he has decided to sign his entry-level deal today, along with Noah Dobson signing his entry-level with the New York Islanders. I think both of these guys should be primed to make the NHL. Dobson's still a little bit of a question mark if he'll make it, but with all the holes that the Islanders have on their back end, I could see Dobson making the team. And Tkachuk, there's a top 6 spot for him. And if you go off what his brother did and what his dad did, I think he'll make the jump pretty easily into the NHL.
Well, fingers crossed. Canucks training camp. Quinn Hughes has an incredible camp and decides to sign rather than go back to Michigan State. But again, he's already announced it. Fingers crossed, though, right? You never know. So let's get into our 31 teams in 31 days. Today we're doing the St. Louis Blues. You know that song, When the Saints Come Marching In. A lot of guys who go back that play NHL hockey know what I'm talking about. That song always comes on whenever the St. Louis Blues score. But let's get into the forwards, talk about their potential forward lines, and break that down for us.
All right. So before I get into the forwards, just a little big thing here. It's very interesting with some of the big names that they had last year. They had the 30th ranked power play, which is weird at 15.4%, and they only scored 223 goals, which was 24th. So I'm expecting a big improvement this year with some of the moves that they've done. The top line of Jaden Schwartz, Braden Shen, and Vladimir Tarasenko will lead them as their top line. That top line was one of the best in the NHL until Schwartz went down with injury, which really hurt them. Schwartz only played 62 games, but had 59 points, so just about point-a-game player. Tarasenko had a bit of a dip in production, only had 33 goals and 66 points in 80 games, and separated his shoulder towards the very end of the season. I'll expect Tarasenko to move back up into the 40 goal, 80-point range. And he's actually one of my favorite players to watch in the NHL. It's something about Russian players. They're just really fun to watch. And Braden Shen, coming over from Philadelphia, finally got a shot as a top-line center and had 70 points in 82 games, which was a really good year for him. The second line I have is Alex Steen, Ryan O'Reilly, and David Perron. Ryan O'Reilly, they get him from Buffalo in a massive trade. And David Perron coming from Vegas through free agency back to St. Louis. O'Reilly, one of the best two-way centers in the league. And the big thing here is that he's hardly been injured. Health-wise and consistency, he's basically always been around that 60-point mark every year. Alex Steen is still a pretty productive player. He's battled through some injuries here and there. His production slipped a little bit to 15 goals and 46 points. I'll expect that to bring a big jump this year. Perron will be interesting to see how he does, because he had a career year in Vegas last year, I think around like 66 points. I might see a bit of a dip in production this year, but it'll be intriguing to see how he fits. The third line, more newcomers to this team: Patrick Maroon, Tyler Bozak, and Robbie Fabry. Maroon just recently signed a little while ago on a cheap one-year deal. And Tyler Bozak, another big signing for the Blues, coming over from the Maple Leafs, should provide a lot of depth on that third line. But the big get here is Robbie Fabry. Back-to-back years, tearing his ACL in the preseason. Just terrible luck. I think I brought it up before we were talking. I think the only other athlete that I've seen or heard of in the recent years is Travis Lulay with the BC Lions. I know that's not a hockey reference. So.
Hockey show. We're a hockey show.
but Robbie Fabry, if he is healthy, I think he could move up into their top six and should be around that 25 goal, 50-plus point range. He's a smaller guy, but when he was healthy, he was a really productive player for them, but just terrible luck health-wise. And then the fourth line, there's about 5 or 6 guys that will be battling out for these spots, and it sort of depends on how the Blues want to play with their fourth line. So they have Nikita Shoshnikov, Ivan Barbashev, and Dmitry Jaskin. All 3 of these guys are younger players. Barbashev will touch more into the prospects that you'll bring up, but Jaskin and Shoshnikov should be battling for spots on that fourth line. Jaskin actually had a pretty good World Championship over with the Czech Republic after the season ended. He still has to get a bit more consistency production-wise. He only had 17 points, but I think he has room for improvement there. Some other guys that will be looking for spots are veterans Jordan Nolan and Chris Thorburn. Both of these guys are crash and bangers that can put the puck in a little bit. So if they want, with the Blues, as we know in past years, they always like to be big and physical. So both of those guys, depending on who they're playing, could get some playing time. Along with center Oscar Sundqvist, who was brought over from Pittsburgh before last year and got into 42 games, but only had 5 points, but it's more a little bit more center depth there.
I like their forward depth this year. They've done some really good work, especially with the trades and the signings that they had. Their top 3 lines, depending on who's coaching, they could be moving those players around depending on who's moving and playing well. They might, throughout the year, because of those injuries last year to Schwartz and Tarasenko, they played with a lot of different players, right? Like Shen and Steen played with a whole bunch of different players. Steen has been on the fourth line before, and he's been on the first line before. So it really depends what they want to do. But I really like the size. If this team has Thorburn, Nolan, and Maroon all playing at the same time, plus guys like Shen O'Reilly and Perron are all feisty. This could be a really frustrating forward group to play against for any team that goes into St. Louis or any team St. Louis plays while they're on the road. Let's talk about their defense. Their defense is led by their top pair, Steady Eddie Joe Bouwmeester, who can just log minutes. Doesn't put up a lot of offensive numbers, but he's so solid back in his own zone, and he still skates very well and is one of the best skaters still in the NHL. Alex Pietrangelo, though, his defense partner, definitely can put up the points. Right-handed shot, leads the power play, and they really will rely on him, as well as the other right-handed D, Colton Parayko, for the offense from that back end. Joel Edmondson's a guy that I really liked to see last year when I caught St. Louis playing. He's a younger guy that can put up points as well, and he's got a rugged edge to him. But those four defense are a really good core and nucleus to this St. Louis defense. So if they stay healthy, they're going to be a force to reckon with. Now, they've got three other guys that are probably going to be in and out of the lineup for the other two spots. But Vince Dunn and Carl Gunnarsson will more than likely start there with Robert Bortuzzo as the spare guy, subbing in and out where needed. There's another guy, Jordan Schmaltz, who may get in. We've got him listed as a prospect, though, so we'll touch on him in a little bit. But what do you think of this defense, Matt?
Yeah, pretty solid. I think Alex Pietrangelo, I think he could potentially win a Norris Trophy down the road. He's a bit of an underrated defenseman, not talked about as much as some of the guys like Drew Doughty and Hedman and Carlson, etc. But yeah, he had 54 points, 15 goals in 78 games last year. And Colton Parayko is a guy that I'm very intrigued with because his point production hasn't been, I think, as high as I think it can be. He had 35 points last year, but only 6 goals. But I think the past 2 years watching him play for Canada at the World Championships, this guy's slap shot, my
bomb. He's got an absolute cannon.
yeah, you want to talk about like Sammy Salo type slap shot. I would love to see this guy get more production on the power play and just let him rip. But with Pietrangelo there, that's the tough thing with them both being right-handed defensemen. As good as both guys are, Pietrangelo usually gets the key over him. But yeah, Joel Edmondson was another guy I've been impressed with over the past couple of years. I think he's coming in on a new contract this year, so it'll be interesting to see how he does. And Vince Dunn had actually a really good rookie season, which I really like, 24 points in 75 games. Just another good young defenseman. But yeah, Schmaltz, who will get into the prospects, I think he could be pushing for a spot, being a first rounder all the way back in 2012. But I think with him going the college route, he's been taking longer to get into the NHL.
Yeah, well, Schmaltz got in 13 games last year and is going to make a case at training camp to stay with that team. Why don't you touch on the goaltending, as well as maybe a couple of the goaltender prospects that they have for us, and then we'll jump into their I'll jump into their big prospects, and we'll touch on some of their other future guys that they have.
All right. So the goalies this year for St. Louis will be Jake Allen and Chad Johnson. Johnson coming over from Buffalo. I know his numbers were basically, horrendous last year. But when you're playing in front of Buffalo, you can't really expect a whole lot. So I think he might have a bit of a bounce back here for St. Louis if you go back to his years in Calgary and Arizona. I think he's still a capable backup. But yeah, Jake Allen is the intriguing name here. He's shown in the past that he can be a really great goalie, but he's had these mental lapses that have just thrown the team off. Like last year, Carter Hutton really stepped up for them when he wasn't playing well. But yeah, Allen played in 59 games, went 27, 25, and 3, and his save percentage was .906. Which is way below what you would want your number one goalie to be. But I'm expecting a bounce back year for him this year, especially with nobody really pushing him for starts. I would expect him to be the 60-plus starts this year, and could potentially, as he's shown in the playoffs, can be rock solid in that back net. But that's the key for St. Louis this year, is if Jake Allen can consistently show up every night and give them a chance to win. Their third stringers is a bit of a battle. They don't really have a veteran backup or third stringer, but it'll be a battle between goalie Billy Husso, who was a fourth-round pick in 2014, and Jordan Binnington, who was a third-round pick in 2011. Both had really good numbers in the American League. Husso getting some call-ups during the year. He went 15, 14, and 0 in 38 games in the American League, but had a .922 save percentage and 4 shutouts. And Binnington got into 28 games with Providence, which was Boston's farm team. Got into 28 games, went 17-9, but had a .926 save percentage and 1 shutout. So both of these guys putting up good numbers in the American League, but I think Billy Husso has a bit of an edge on Binnington, just size-wise, and another Finnish goalie coming up.
They keep coming.
I know, yeah, and could potentially maybe get into some starts this year.
Having Ryan O'Reilly up the middle is definitely going to help too, because one of the best face-off men in the NHL will lead to more possession in their own zone on those critical draws. Jake Allen, by the way, best pads in the NHL. For me, let's touch on a couple other prospects. They're two big prospects. The first one I'll touch on, I have a couple of websites are saying he's going to make the team this year. He was their first-round pick in 2017. Center Robert Thomas played 49 games in OHL last year with 75 points. Split it between the London Knights and the Hamilton Bulldogs. And, of course, in the playoffs, he had 32 points in only 21 games with Hamilton and absolutely led that team. Played for Canada, the World Juniors, 6 points in 7 games. And this guy, he's got a lot of offensive potential. He's shown a lot of flash. And a lot of people have him pegged as the third or fourth line potential player this year with St. Louis. We touched on Ivan Barbashev already a little bit. He did play 53 games with the big club last year, getting 13 points. Before that, he played 20 games with the minor league team, the Chicago Wolves. Great team, by the way. Great logo, too. He had 10 points in those 20 games in the farm. He's a guy that they're listing as potential fourth-line player, but like Matt said, there's a lot of guys vying for those last few spots. Now, the other big prospect is another World Junior Canadian player, Jordan Kyrou, who played for the Sarnia Sting in the OHL. 56 games this guy played last year, and get this, folks, 109 points. Just an absolute beast when it comes to scoring goals. Somehow he got shut down in the playoffs, though. Only 4 points in 12 games. But for the World Juniors with Team Canada, he had 10 points in 7 games. Had some clutch plays for sure. Jordan Kyrou. I expect this guy. He was a second-round pick in 2016. He may vie for a spot as well. This St. Louis team is absolutely loaded. They have some veterans to step in if they don't think the kids are ready. But you've got a few more prospects first. Why don't you take us through a few more, and then we'll finish it off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another first-round pick, along with Robert Thomas, was Klim Kostin, big Russian winger. Spent the year in the American League, had 28 points in 67 games. But this is a prospect St. Louis is pretty high on. They were pretty pumped that they didn't have to give him up in the Ryan O'Reilly trade. That was Tage Thompson, who they gave up on. But yeah, he's a big Russian winger who could be vying for a spot in a couple years. He's still more in the development stage in the American League. Another guy, Sammy Blaise, a winger for them, had 40 points in only 42 games in the American League last year and got into 11 games in the NHL, gained 1 goal and 3 points. He's another scoring winger who will be looking to make the big club this year. So they got a lot of young forwards that will be looking to push these veterans that they've brought in for spots. another first-rounder, Dominic Bach, from this year, big German winger, had 41 points in 35 games in the Swedish Junior League, and gone to 15 games in the Swedish Elite League, getting 1 goal and 2 points. He'll be a guy more and more further down the road to make the team. And lastly, another goalie prospect, Evan Fitzpatrick, second-round pick in 2016, led Acadie Bathurst to the QMJHL Championship and the Memorial Cup Championship. His numbers were pretty good for Acadie Bathurst, going 17-3 with a .915 save percentage and 1 shutout. And in the playoffs, he went 16-4 with a .925 save percentage and 2 shutouts. This is another goalie that could be pushing in a few years from now, along with like Billy Husso, that could be pushing for the #1 job in the later future.
One more prospect I've got is their second-round pick from this year, Scott Paranovich, who is going to the University of Minnesota Duluth. I know the St. Louis Blues and their fans are super high on this guy. They're excited for him, but they're going to have to wait as he goes the NCAA route and a few years away from signing a contract. So 94 points last year, St. Louis Blues. Where do you see them finishing this year?
All right, so I see a big improvement this year. I have them finishing 3rd in the Central Division, ahead of Minnesota and Colorado this year. So it will be interesting to see how they do. I brought it up. I think the big thing will be on Jake Allen this year and his play. But with all the weapons they have up front now and their defense being one of the good young defense corps in the NHL, they have all the pieces there. It's just everything has to come together this year.
Yeah, I definitely see them finishing higher as well. I have them pencil in for about 105 points, and that should be good for 3rd as well. I don't think they're going to challenge Nashville or Winnipeg, but, man, they're going to get stuck playing one of those 2 teams in the playoffs. A great way to make the playoffs again. Like, there's no easy round anymore in the playoffs. Like, every team is so good just for making the playoffs. I love the NHL playoffs. I can't wait. But St. Louis, I really like what I see with them, and I do see them finishing 3rd as well, around 100 to 105 points. So that wraps up our show for today. We thank you once again for joining us. Remember to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Make sure to share our broadcast with your fellow hockey fanatics that are out there. We are in the dog days of summer, so that's why we're doing these team previews. We're going to be doing a lot more hockey throughout the season. Obviously, a lot more stuff on the Canucks because we are from the Vancouver market here, and this market is hockey crazy. But we really appreciate you guys. Much love to you. B&B Hockey Talk. This is Aaron Bloxel with Matthew Balzer. You guys have a fantastic day, and we'll see you here all tomorrow.